As I'm sure you can already tell, for today's TTT, I'm going to be talking a bit about Mastemon. Now, I actually did have an iteration of this video recorded and ready to be uploaded on Tuesday, but I decided to stream a little bit that day and I took a nap. I told myself once I woke back up, I would upload the video, but I woke up really late, and by time I did, Bandai had revealed a third Mirai Mikagura. Now, I could have just talked about her at the end of the previous video as an addendum because she does address some of the weaknesses I think that currently exist for Mastemon, some of the awkward aspects of the deck. But I think it made more sense to just remake the video from scratch and use a couple of examples and just kind of weave her into the discussion. So that's what I'm doing here today. Now, Mastemon is one of my favorite decks of all time because it's so flexible. There's so many different variants. Like, even if I don't necessarily use them myself, a lot of the time I'll look up different lists and I'll see people running cards. I'm just like, huh, why are they running that? But then I look at the rest of the list. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. They just structured this completely differently. Let me think about it. And I'm like, okay, after that, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Makes sense. I get it. And I would often try these decks out, and it's even easier to do that now because DCGO is a thing. So it's really like nice getting a feel for these different things and just having it in the back of my mind that okay, like this is another option that I can go for if I need it, right? Now that being said, I do have another reason for remaking this video. I was discussing Mastemon recently, and I was arguing that the BT11 Angemon is a much better card now as a consequence of the EX6 Mirai Mikagura existing. I do wish this card was a little bit better. I wish it had another effect or an inheritable or something, but it's actually quite serviceable now because you could do something like running purple base. You got Narumon, Digivolve into either of the starter deck Gabumons, and then play down your EX6 Mirai. On the next turn, if you have the memory for it, you move out, Digivolve into the Angemon, you swing at your opponent's security, you draw two trash two, hopefully trashing a Devimon. In the event the Angemon is deleted, it floats into the Devimon and you Digivolve into your level 5 for a reduced cost. In the event that it's not deleted, you can just directly pass to your opponent by Digivolving over it into one of your level 5s. Either way it goes, it's pretty decent value. It's not the craziest thing, but that's also kind of one of the weaknesses of Mastemon. The deck is very reliant on this Gatomon specifically, and a lot of your level 4 options are like on par with each other. I wouldn't even say any of them are like really crazy good. It's kind of funny that the Adventure Gatomon is just entirely generic, so you could just run this if you want to. But you also can get extra setup from running something like the BT14 Devimon because it has this on play to trash the top 3 cards of your deck. So in the event you see both Angemon and Devimon, you can pitch this. And if you don't have a level 5 you want to pitch from your hand, you play this off the on deletion effect. You resolve its on play, you mill 3, and then if you have a valid target, you can resolve the Mirai Mikagura. In any case, you could still resolve the Mirai Mikagura because you did play out the body, you just wouldn't be able to Digivolve. But the added memory would potentially allow you to end your turn more efficiently by not passing your opponent too much memory, right? So it's pretty decent value. But yeah, that said, the overall discussion resulted in me being told underdogs don't have the luxury of flexible thinking, which to me is a bit ridiculous. Like, there are some instances where this is a true statement, but I think the number of times a character, a deck, a class, or whatever else is relevant in this instance is so legitimately undertuned, so weak, so limited in its options that it has no choice but to lean into what few it has. Like we don't even really get that in fighting games that much anymore, right? But even in those instances, I can look at something like Hayao in I think losers finals of Evo last year because he's on Hugo and Hugo is a I believe a mid tier character. He literally used a button, a move that is normally useless to put himself in a prime position to win the game he was playing. And it's not even like it was something he could just do on reaction. He had to acknowledge, okay, this is an option my opponent can go for, and the best way for me to beat this is to put this input in early because the move itself is slow, right? I'll just toss the Evo moment 38 on screen because that's what I've been seeing people call it. This is how you drive things forward: innovation and adaptation. And I don't know, it's just really weird for me to hear this from people who play TCGs too, because so often we'll have decks top in events precisely because somebody sat down and they put in the time and effort to really understand that, like, oh wait, like I have the capability of using my tools in different ways. Galactic Mon is a really good example of this because I actually have a write-up that I probably should just turn into a video soon, where I talked about all these little nuances of Galacticmon. And when we got the Zenith Tamer, the first one, the one that can strip to Vemmon to Digivolve an opponent's Digimon, people were like, oh, you can use this to unsuspend. But prior to that card even existing, there were instances where I would actively swing into my opponent's security if I was playing against like Royal Knights or something that I know that has really high DP. Sometimes it was Sekon, right? And I would use the protection effect of Galactic to unsuspend on my own turn. And almost every single time I did this, within the first like year and a half of Galacticmon being a thing, my opponent was blown away, even though I was like, from the onset, hey, this is an all turns effect. I can use this on my own turn. And I guess it's just because they look at it at the baseline value, like, oh, you don't have a way to actively trigger this normally. Why should I care about that? Right? And there may be some instances where I won games specifically because my opponent thought my damage clock was lower than it was. And when I say damage clock, I'm just talking about my like the amount of damage I can do on a given turn, which is something that I think is very important to think about. I'm gonna link the Life Burst podcast pace theory video in the description for anybody who wants to check that out. But yeah, it's the actual reason I have BWG stuff here at the bottom with the Aboromon. Like I talked about this before, but in BT11, the set that Galacticmon was released in, I wasn't actually comfortable playing the deck because it was the BWG meta. There was two really, really big issues. One thing is Gaiomon could de-digivolve you. The other more important issue is the BT8 Metal Greymon gave this deck the ability to attack you unsuspended. So there were a number of instances where you couldn't adequately defend yourself from the onslaught that BWG would present you with. The matchup wasn't completely unwinnable or anything, but it was like 30-70, at least in my plays testing, in favor of BWG. So I was like, you know what, I'll just shelve the deck for now and I'll play something else. I hadn't played Diaboromon up until that point, but I had been collecting the cards. So I was like, you know what? Let me try that out. And through a combination of the EX1 Caramon giving me extra DP, efficient Digivolution with the BT2 Inframon and a lot of the other BT2 cards, because I was running a couple BT5s, and this Diaboromon specifically that gave me a lot of security attack, I was able to reasonably play into BWG. Because if they went the Gaio route, I think I was running the other Diaboromon that gives blocker at 2 copies or something like that. We'd be able to offset some of its offense by just having those blockers. Because I was running the decoy, I could pretty consistently maintain my main body unless, they were deleting me via combat. Another thing you needed to be mindful of in that particular matchup was the BT8 BWG, because when digivolving, it has the capability to delete up to 6 play cost of your Digimon or Tamers, meaning if you had 2 copies of Arata Sonata out, they could delete both of them and you would just lose access to them for the rest of the game. So the way you dealt with this was by playing one and maybe having it alongside an Izzy or a Tai, the one that gives you 1k extra DP on your opponent's turn and sets memory, because now your opponent is forced to choose between them, right? And as much as they might want to get rid of the memory setter in this situation, they're very likely just going to get rid of the errata instead, because it gives you that fourth memory while also being able to generate a token, which is a method by which you can gain more memory because of the other Karamon, not the Karamon, the other Kurisarimon inheritable. Additionally, because you no longer have an errata on board, you could slap down a Karamon for searching, the top 5 check, and then digivolve to your Kurisarimon for 2, playing out another errata, getting a whole lot of value in one fell swoop. Or if you had a Karamon in the back, you move up, digivolve for 2, digivolve for 2 again. If you had any memory boost or anything like that, and access to this Inframon in particular, you could actually go up the whole line again and spawn a bunch of tokens. It was wonderful. The other Diabormon you ran was the I forget which set it was from, but when digivolving, it would spawn Diabormon token. The deck was like legit so vanilla and entirely carried by your gameplay, by your ability to adapt and utilize your tools appropriately. And of course, the list itself did need to be solid in the first place, but you also needed to be able to adapt mid game. And that's another thing that happens. Like obviously, if you're playing any kind of deck, you need to be able to adapt mid game. But I was only able to do that via playtesting, getting my shit completely rocked, and going, okay, what was the issue here, and addressing it. Now, going back to Mastemon, I think it's very clear to a lot of people that the low end in Mastemon is kind of the issue, right? We were okay in BT9 due to the pace of the game. We had access to some pretty interesting tools, such as Kumon, Crackmon, and the Mako Mochizuki here, right? You play your two color purple and yellow Digimon, you gain a memory. So she could trash some cards, setting you up to use your starter deck Mastemon when Digivolving effect, while also making it so your Gatomon was much more efficient for each copy that you play. And this is actually one thing that this Murray sort of does. Like, she obviously does not gain you memory or anything like that, but she gives you early game filter instead of blind mill, which at least I personally prefer. And as a consequence of this, you have targeted setup. Then on a subsequent turn, she bot decks herself and plays a 4 play cost or higher Mirai Mikagura from your hand. And I think this is really good because, like, while yes, you can potentially play it for free thanks to the EX6 Angelomon and EX6 Lady Devimon, her being a 3 cost option that you can go for is really, really good. Like, I think there are still instances where you want to use Amber Memory Boost, but on average, I think this card is what you really want to be seeing because anytime you float her into the BT11 Murray, that is just an extra memory that you're gaining every single turn. And once you see this Murray again from your cycling with the Gatomons and whatnot, that's more filter, right? Getting more of this on board is also really, really good because when you do play things down, your plays become much more efficient. Like, she's so good because your early game filter and being able to cycle your tamers have been the biggest issues that you have had. I really wish when I first went back to my locals, I played against a guy who was on Imperial. Now, this was after the restriction, but like he wasn't aware because I think he was just visiting because normally he works in Alaska, I believe. And we had like genuinely what felt like one of those like if Digimon had like we have the Liberator manga, right? We had a game that feels like a finale, like a season finale, because I didn't see Mastemon. I like any of my because I was running 6 copies. I didn't see any of my Mastemon early on in the game, and if I did, I would have been able to close out the game a little bit more effectively, right? But once he stabilized, I also started to see my Mastemons. And we ended up in a game state where I believe he made 4 different Pyodramons. No, no, it was actually 5 different Pyodramons in one turn, and I either neutralized them or otherwise removed them repeatedly. But because of the BT12 XVmon and Stingmon being the way they are, he kept gaining memory in the process of doing this, so he was able to extend his turn. Now, of course, I lost this game, right? But it hammered home a couple of things that I already knew, and this was reinforced when I talked to my opponent. I believe his name is Thomas after the game because we talked about our game progression and stuff like that. He mentioned how important it was for him to have the Davis Ken because being able to play out the level 3 was good, not only because it gave him a body he could potentially digivolve on, but it was really important because it allowed him to get extra searching for free, right? So you have this 4 cost tamer. That is a pretty decent investment, but the return on investment you get turn after turn after turn, especially if your opponent isn't able to remove your bodies, is insane. And a lot of the time, they won't be able to remove your bodies in the case of Imperial because you'll frequently just be able to Evo up a line. And if you can keep turn by going into your Pyojimon, you don't really mind giving your opponent 4 memory in some instances to play down a second Tamer, especially if you know it's a matchup that doesn't have access to Tamer removal, because then you're like, okay, I get out 2 bodies for free. I can Digivolve on top of them and go up my line. Yes, it's a total of 4 memory, but because I have 2 of these Tamers, as long as I get 2 memory to begin with, I can potentially keep my turn just from suspending them and getting my, end of turn DNA. It's really, really good, right? And it's also part of the reason why, like, Mastemon in the past has run Ignitemon, and sometimes you'll still see builds running Ignitemon, because if you can ever get the setup to go up the line with the BT11 Murray, you'll gain 1 memory off the Ignite. And if the Digimon you Digivolve directly into was either your BT11 Lady Devimon or Angelomon, you're gaining another memory off of that, right? So, okay, decent offsets. And then when you DNA Digivolve, all of those inheritable sources, if they are OPT, are reset because it's an entirely new Digimon. So Mastemon plays out a body, you get another memory. It's been kind of the like dream to have plays like that are very memory efficient, but in practice it becomes very difficult to do that. It's actually part of the reason why in the builds where I would run the 2 starter deck Gabumon, I'd very frequently only be running 2 copies of Ignite. Now, 10 level 3s in some instances might seem a little bit low, especially if you are intent on digivolving up a line, which I was doing very frequently. But there were also a number of instances where I had to hard play this Gatomon or that Gatomon or whatever else I was using to get a decent amount of search. Uh, Additionally, if you did run Cody and TK, because they play out Armadillomon or Patamon, you can get a decent bit of value by using this promo Patamon over here, because you can add a yellow or black card with 2 or more colors among them to your hand. And if you added a card, recover 1 deck. So this is really nice if you're running Chaos Degradation, Hell Scythe, or whatever else, because this can grab your options, Digimon, and Tamers. Reducing your opponent's security DP also comes up. Like, it's one thing that I really like about this Salamon. The minus 3k is kind of crazy, because in those instances where you're forced to swing out because you want to make use of, like, let's say the Gatomon inheritable here, or if you're using this Gatomon as your level 4 and instead using the EX6 Salamon, right? Maybe you want to get rid of an opponent's floodgate. It makes it so much more reasonable for you to potentially live that singular security check, which is really, really nice. At least depending on the matchup. Because if you're playing into like Royal Knights or something like that, you're probably cooked regardless, because this only makes you effectively 11k DP. And yeah, a lot of their bodies match that. So you're gonna slam into an 8k and combust if you're on any of the Lady Devimons. The only thing that would live through it is Angelomon here, which doesn't need the DP minus to begin with. Aside from that, though, oh, another thing that makes this Murray such a really good card is the fact that you can enable these a little bit more easily. There have been a number of instances where I've played games against decks that have pretty consistent Tamer removal, and while you can get your Murrays back to your hand from the trash, the really annoying thing is having the right card in your hand to play one out from the correct zone. If you have more Murrays in rotation, that means you'll more consistently be able to play them off of these cards in the situations where you want them. And these cards also just become like more solid to me. I'm trying to think of how to phrase my frustration. So when it comes to the EX6 Lady Devimon and Angelomon, I dislike the fact that they don't have a fail condition. By which I mean, I dislike the fact that in the event you cannot play a Murray for whatever reason, and you also don't have one on board, they don't do anything. For example, have a Murray that got bot decked, right? So there aren't any in your trash, and now this Lady Devimon that you Digivolve into or play has nothing to put on board. But that also means it can't delete anything. Likewise, Angelomon, you don't have a Murray because maybe it got deleted and sent to the trash, and you also don't have one in your hand. Once again, this card isn't doing anything at all. If they were phrased slightly differently, like if they said, if you do not control a Murray Mikagura, play one, and then if this effect didn't play, security attack -2, delete one of your opponent's level 4 Digimon. That would mean in the event that you fail to play at all for any reason, you still get the effects. This might not seem like that big of a deal, but I did have a couple of instances back in EX6 where I was playing games and I genuinely thought to myself, I can't believe that the starter deck Angelomon would be better right now because I was put into exactly that kind of situation. It was so bad. I was playing against a really weird Galaxy build. I say weird because the level 4 lineup was not a lot of like Light Fang Nightclaw stuff, but they kept going into the Mirage Galmon that bounces Tamers. So my Tamers just kept getting bot deck, and I just didn't have access to any of them. It was rough. I can't even remember how that game ended. I would like to assume that I lost, but yeah, it was just really really rough being in that situation and being like, oh, it would be really really good if I could prevent them from checking too much of my security right now. I just need to like stall a little bit to set myself up, play some Tamers back down, stuff like that, and I just did not have the opportunity to do it. And sometimes you might even benefit from this having a fail condition, if they were worded like that, because you could actively like pitch tamers so you don't have any to play out off of this because you need to give something security attack minus in the moment. But yeah, I'm not really hoping for these cards to be directly crept or upgraded, but that was probably my main area of frustration with them. The lesser area of frustration is the fact that I actually do run Ordean. This is a pretty nice card for removing wide boards. It can help you come back from the brink. And in the past, I actually did run Raguelmon because in some late game scenarios, it could be an easy way to quickly go into this, heal yourself back up, and engage with the opponent, right? Which is kind of cool. You also could use it as offensive pressure, like in BT9. Sometimes I would Digivolve on top of the starter deck Angelomon with the Angelomon X antibody. Give something security attack -1, I'd heal. You also could just Digivolve directly into this to get the security attack -1, or give it rather to something. And I would swing into security. Sometimes it would live the 2 checks, not leave them. And if it lived, I'd potentially, depending on what's in inheritables, be able to go into a Mastemon. And then I'd be able to get the extra 2 checks. Likewise, there were a number of instances where I was able to get into 2 Mastemons on my board, so I would check my opponent's security, and maybe I get them down to 0, but I don't have a rush body, or if I do have a rush body, I don't have the capability to put it on board without spending memory that would end my turn. So, what do you do in that situation? You go into Ordean, baby. And a really funny thing about this card is over time, it's become easier to go into it. And that might not seem like that big of a deal, but because you're still very likely running the BT11 cards, this thing still can get blocker and retaliation. So you can use it to block a lot of things. And even in the event that it's not blocking anything, you can use the scapegoat inheritable off of the Lady Devimon to pop it to protect your Mastemon. And it will just trash your security to play itself back out, which will trigger the starter deck Mastemon's effect. One of your Digimon was played by an effect. Oh, would you look at that? You get to delete an opponent's Digimon. Unfortunately, I just realized I deleted some gameplay footage, but I was playing against, I think, a Galamon player last week, and they did that. Like, they tried to get rid of this one. I believe I may have had the Angelomon Ace under it, so they were trying to get the extra memory, right? But I just used Scapegoat to delete my Ordean and trash my security, and I did it again, and I outed their board. Now, unfortunately, I clearly didn't have a method to go for lethal when it came back to my turn, which was a bit rough. So when they did the same thing on a subsequent turn, I wasn't sure if I should do that play or not because trashing my own security could have meant that I lost the game, and that is basically what happened. So yeah, I'm just trying to be as transparent with you. Like, I do think this card is solid in some situations, but it does have its downsides. It does have its trade-offs. Currently, I've seen some people use the BT18 Lucemon, and I totally understand this because it's once again a bridge card. The downside that exists now that we have a new Mastemon is she's incapable of playing him, which is a bit rough. But nonetheless, this card is decently strong. It forces your opponent into an awkward position, and it's one of the few ways that you can just heal yourself. Another thing is the level 3 Lucemon. This was something I previously, in like older formats, would potentially play off of this, but I also do like it in conjunction with no, not you, with you, because she can play it out after you play a body, letting you heal up, and because he's 10k, you can use alliance with it and not only just swing into security really safely, but there have been a number of instances where I was able to out Gallantmon, a suspended Gallantmon, X antibody, by tapping this because my opponent was only like 22k. Sometimes I would do it when they were 23k and just crash. Really, really nice. There was a card I forgot to include initially, but at one point I actually did run Underworld's Call because it was potentially another way to filter if I didn't really need it in the early game, and later on in the game I could pay for a cost to play a purple level 4 or lower Digimon card for my trash, which would again allow me to actually trigger Mastemon's effect, which could help me deleting floodgates or whatever, while also getting Gatomon out for cheaper, and with Mako, or more recently with the EX6 Mirai, I'd be able to gain a decent bit of memory. Oh, another reason that you might run TK Cody if you aren't running a yellow base, or if you're just not using Patamon at all, is because of the your turn effect. Getting the Digivolution is very similar to just playing Lucemon Chaos mode from BT7, because a lot of the time you'd play this guy out, you delete your opponent's level 7, and then you'd use Mastermon's effect to delete a level 5. Now, you can also use this as a method to delete level 6s, potentially, at least. So that's pretty nice. I'm honestly hoping in the future they do print another Ophanimon Fall Down mode, or other just like Angel Digimon that you could potentially use as a direct Digivolution. Having something that's 3 cost, I think, would be really, really nice. I guess another thing you can do is just run the BT3 Mastemon, because, of course, trash build player security, so you're advancing your damage clock like that. You play out a body. If the body triggers this Mirai, you can gain some memory. You don't even need to Digivolve, so you could bring back the Rush Devimon to close out a game. Or, let's say you went into either the starter deck Mastemon or the new promo one. By going into her, on top of the level 5 that you play, you could potentially do a DNA Digivolution play into Ordine and clear out the opponent's board without feeling like you're being wasteful by hard digivolving into one of these, and of course without having the offset of, okay, I can't protect this body, and when it dies I will overflow, because that is one downside of Ordine. She does not benefit from Scapegoat or Alliance, which is again a little bit frustrating, but it's not that big of a deal. In any case, I'm interested to see if they're going to give any other support from BT22. And oh, I almost forgot. I have to talk about her. I've been running a single copy of Lady Devimon X Antibody recently, and I like this so much. It's so good. Unfortunately, being 8k DP does mean you cannot play her off of the promo Mastemon, but being able to Digivolve on top of any of your Lady Devimons after you play out an Angelomon off of your Mirai Tamer or whatever is so nice. Oh, okay. I forgot. I need to talk about her. So, Lady Devimon X Antibody is a card I've been running at a single copy as kind of a compromise, because if you Digivolve into this, you cannot do your Ace play with Mastemon Ace, but there's been a lot of situations where I'll Digivolve into a Lady Devimon. Maybe I'll play out an Angelomon off of the BT11 Mirai, gain the memory and everything. Then I Digivolve into this. I get to give one of my opponent's Digimon end of attack, delete his Digimon. Then, if Lady Devimon or X Antibody is in its traits, we get the block retaliation token. I was running a Soul BT9 Solomon, and that allowed me to search out my option cards. Like, I was like, oh, you know what? I really want to see Chaos Degradation now. I know they're both in my deck. I shuffled them back, should be close, just trying to remember where your cards are. And it's like, okay, yes, I got it. And that's great. Because then coming back to my turn, whatever my opponent did, I potentially now have a tool to engage with them. Um, Hell, even playing this out, right? This doesn't trigger on play on the opponent's turn, of course, but they have to now be mindful that, oh, okay, they're forcing the setup. Because maybe you just don't have your scrambles in rotation at this point in time. Maybe you're not running them at all, and that's a way to kind of have something going on. Um, but yeah, like I don't know. This card has been so impactful that I really want to see them make a new Angelomon X antibody just because I'm hoping the inheritable would be useful enough that I'd be willing to do the split. But for now, I believe my build is something like three of this, and one ace. And for Lady Devi, we're on 3 BT11, a 3X6, and 1X antibody. So yeah, um, that's all I have for now. I'm just like again really excited for this card. I think it just you can probably make builds now where you're running 8 to 10 maraes and be overall solid. It will make deck construction a little awkward in some ways. It might actually end up being closer to Sakuyamon on some level, where your Digimon count will progressively go down. We'll have to see. I kind of doubt that'll be the case though, just because you need so many level fives in the first place to do your game plan. It's really weird to think about because Machine Dramon is another deck that I play, and I think I also tend to have 13 to 14 level fives in that deck. But Machine Dramon has consistently felt a bit easier to set up as a consequence of the inherent protections that its level sixes have access to, and then cards like Supreme Connection over time making it easier to set your board up to begin with. Like even looking forward to EX9, right? Is EX9 later this month, I think? The new Machine Dramon has assembly 6, I think. So it goes down from 12 cost to 6 when its condition is met. But if you Supreme Connection it, you can play it for 3, right? I don't know, man. Overall, it's just like I'm blown away that they actually went this direction for Murray because this was like my wish list. This was like the thing I didn't think they would do, you know? Because I was sitting down and I was like, if we had a Murray that could like trade itself in for the other ones. When I was trying to figure out ways they could make Murray better, I felt like doing tailor-made Digimon effects would probably not be something they'd really want to do because like even if they started doing main phase effects, which I'm very glad they're actually doing that in BT22, or at least doing it to a greater degree, I didn't really think it was all that reasonable to give it something like, main phase, draw one, trash one, right? Like that's opening up a really weird floodgate potentially because it's costless. So if they gave an effect like that, I was like, okay, what if they make it cost 1, 2 memory, something like that? But I was like, wait, no. The better thing to do would be giving us a Moray that is our early game filter and can tag herself into the other Morays. But I told myself it would never happen. I told myself that they weren't going to go for it. I told myself that even though it genuinely would help smooth out the gameplay experience of Mastemon, almost regardless of build, I just couldn't believe they would do it. But here they are. And they also worded it such that it cannot cycle into copies of itself. So you do still need to run the other Marays. And in some capacity, it's actually future proof because if they make new Marays down the line that are for cost or higher, she already works with them. Yeah, I don't know. I'm super hyped about this. It's 2:30 for me right now, so I'm gonna head off to now. It's 2:30 for me, so I'm gonna get ready to go to locals. I'm gonna head over a little bit early. And all of y'all have a nice day. Hopefully, I'll have some gameplay footage, but my phone might actually be a bit too full. We'll see what happens. Later.